40 years of laughter, and not one person thought to ask what it cost her. Lucille Ball gave America something it had never had before. A woman on screen who was allowed to fail completely and be loved completely for it. And she did it while privately carrying grief, betrayal, and loneliness that never once made it into the frame. By the time she sat down for her final television interview in 1989, the woman in that chair had outlived her best friend, buried the man she never stopped loving, watched her comeback get canceled after 8 episodes, and spent her last years in a house that used to shake with noise and had gone almost entirely quiet. When the interviewer asked what she wanted to be remembered for, she looked down, took her time, and said, "For making people happy." 4 words, no punchline, no performance, just the truth of a woman who had spent a lifetime giving everyone else exactly what she never quite managed to keep for herself. Jamestown, New York, in 1911 had no particular reason to expect greatness from itself, and the Ball family had even less reason to expect it from a 3-year-old girl named Lucille. Her father, Henry Ball, worked as a telephone lineman, the kind of man who climbed poles through ice storms because the job demanded it, and he was not someone who walked away from a demand. Typhoid fever found him in the winter of 1915, and it moved fast. Henry died on February 28 at 27 years old, and the morning after, Lucille's world collapsed into a series of images she carried without interruption for the next 74 years. Her mother's crying, a picture dropping from the wall on its own, and a small bird that had gotten inside the house and couldn't locate the way out. That bird became a terror that followed her everywhere. Hotel rooms with bird-patterned wallpaper had to be changed. Illustrations with birds in them produced a coldness she couldn't explain away. Friends learned not to bring it up because what looked like superstition from the outside was actually something much more specific. A 3-year-old girl standing in the middle of the worst morning of her life, choosing to remember a bird because remembering her father directly was more than she could hold. Her mother, D-Day, was young, pregnant with Lucille's brother Fred, and without the resources to keep the family together, Lucille went to live with relatives while D-Day rebuilt what she could, and those years taught her something that settled into her bones and never quite left, that she was someone people moved away from when things got hard. When D-Day remarried and Lucille returned, her stepfather's parents imposed a household without warmth or softness, banning mirrors so the children wouldn't grow vain, filling the rooms with restraint instead of affection. None of that had anywhere to go in a girl whose natural instinct was performance, and what came out the other side was a kind of control. The ability to arrange her face into something the room needed to see, to project ease when there was none. She described it later as her first acting training, which meant it came not from any school, but from the daily practice of not falling apart in front of people who expected her to be fine. What finished the family off entirely came when Lucille was 12, when her stepfather set up a target practice area in the backyard, and a neighbor boy was struck by a bullet that hit his spine and left him paralyzed. The lawsuit that followed stripped the family of everything. The house, the furniture, the savings, every material thing that functions as evidence that a family exists. Her grandfather, who witnessed the accident and never recovered from it, stopped working entirely. Lucille absorbed all of it and filed it somewhere deep, and years later she described it with the economy of someone who has learned to carry weight without drama. One accident destroyed us. No elaboration, no reaching for sympathy, just the fact, stated plainly, the way people state facts they have made peace with, whether or not they actually have. New York rejected her quickly and without ceremony. The John Murray Anderson School for the Dramatic Arts, which she had scraped money together to attend, sent her home through an instructor who told her mother directly that the investment wasn't worth making and the talent wasn't there. Lucille absorbed that too, sat with it, and came back. Modeling jobs kept her alive in the city, walking runways, posing for photographers, wearing borrowed clothes for designers who wanted their work seen on someone who knew how to inhabit it. When Hollywood came into view, she moved west and spent the 1930s appearing in more than 75 films, almost always positioned as the background. Chorus girls, sidekicks, the woman standing near the star who never quite got to become one. What she gained from all of it was technical and precise, timing, physical control, the exact calculation of how a body moves to produce a laugh. The camera understood her long before the industry caught up. Desi Arnaz walked into her life during the filming of Too Many Girls in 1940, and what she felt for him operated outside her usual defenses. He was Cuban, a musician, confident in a way that took up all available space in a room, and constitutionally incapable of providing the stability she had spent her entire life trying to locate. They danced together between shots, argued through the night, and eloped in Connecticut within months. Everyone in their circle predicted it wouldn't last. None of them were wrong, exactly, but none of them accounted for how long love can survive the evidence against it. Desi drank heavily, stayed out without explanation, and brought a particular quality of chaos into every space he occupied. And Lucy, who had watched chaos dismantle every family structure she'd ever known, stayed anyway because she believed, with a stubbornness that was also a kind of faith, that building something together might hold them in place when nothing else would. That belief produced I Love Lucy. When CBS came to Lucille in 1951 about adapting her radio show My Favorite Husband for television, she agreed on one condition. Desi would play her on-screen husband. The network refused directly, certain that American audiences would not accept an interracial couple in primetime. Lucy refused to negotiate the point, and together they took their act on the road, performing live across the country until the chemistry between them became undeniable enough that CBS ran out of arguments. The show premiered in October 1951, and within a year, 44 million people had organized their Monday nights around it. More viewers than tuned in for presidential addresses, which said something about what the country needed and what Lucy had figured out how to give it. What she brought to that screen was genuinely new. A woman allowed to be completely ridiculous, to fail on camera in the most spectacular ways imaginable, and to be loved more because of it rather than less. The conveyor belt of chocolates, the expanding bread loaf pressing her against the wall, the grape-stomping vat. Each of those scenes required weeks of physical rehearsal and a complete willingness to abandon self-protection, and the panic on her face in every one of them read as real, because at some level it was drawn from a woman who had spent a lifetime holding things together while they fell apart, and who had finally found a place where the falling apart was safe to show. Desi's infidelities were not rumors that circulated at a distance. They were patterns, and Lucy knew them. She stayed through the filming years, telling herself the work mattered, the family mattered, that love this complicated still counted as love. None of that remained when the show ended in 1957, and the professional reason to hold the marriage together dissolved with it. On March 3, 1960, the day after Desi's birthday, and the day after they filmed their final project together, she filed for divorce. 2 months later, it was official. Desi would admit years afterward that he caused all of it, his drinking, his temper, the choices that couldn't be undone, and that he had destroyed the best thing he ever had. He was accurate on every count. Lucy bought out his shares of their production company, Desilu, for $2.5 million, and in doing so became the first woman to run a major Hollywood studio, the company that would go on to produce Star Trek and Mission Impossible and shape the next generation of American television. She rebuilt the professional life with discipline and authority. The personal life she rebuilt with Gary Morton, a comedian 13 years younger who offered stability where Desi had offered fire, and who stayed faithfully beside her until the end. Gary gave me stability, she told a friend. Desi gave me fire. She kept the stability and lived inside it gracefully, and the fire was something she stopped pretending she could replace. The 1950s also delivered a crisis that could have removed everything overnight. In 1953, gossip columnist Walter Winchell used his radio broadcast to suggest that a famous red-headed actress had communist ties, and without naming her, named her completely. Newspapers ran the headline the next morning in red ink, "Lucille Ball named Red." The accusation connected to a decision she made in 1936 when she registered to vote as a member of the Communist Party, not from ideology, not from conviction, but from love for her grandfather, who held strong socialist beliefs and asked her to do it to please him. She did it once, attached no further significance to it, and moved on with her life. 17 years later, in the paranoid atmosphere of McCarthyism, that single forgotten registration had become a weapon capable of ending everything she had built. Lucy appeared voluntarily before House Un-American Activities Committee investigators, explained the circumstances with complete directness, and stated without qualification that she had never been a communist, had never attended a meeting, and had nothing to conceal. Desi understood the battle was as much about public perception as legal fact, and before the next studio taping he stood in front of the live audience and delivered a line that cut through the hysteria cleanly. "The only thing read about Lucy is her hair, and even that isn't real." The audience erupted, the sponsors held, and the crisis passed. But Lucy never forgot how close a single morning's headlines had come to taking everything away. The quieter losses came in the years that followed, and they accumulated without mercy. Desi Jr. struggled publicly through addiction and tabloid scandals, and a relationship with actress Patty Duke generated headlines that dragged the family name through months of public speculation Lucy could neither control nor escape. Rumors that a DNA test would eventually disprove, but not before the damage had already settled. Vivian Vance, her co-star and closest friend from the I Love Lucy years, the one person who understood without needing to be told exactly what that decade of performing had cost them both, was diagnosed with cancer and died in 1979. Lucy told Carol Burnett afterward, "Part of me died with her." And that was not sentiment. That was a precise accounting of something irreplaceable going out of her life permanently. By the mid-1980s, the Beverly Hills home had grown still in a way that Gary Morton described as a sadness that nothing could reach. Old friends were gone. The children lived far away. In 1986, Lucy came out of retirement for a new series called Life with Lucy, returning to the medium she had built with the hope that the instinct and the joy and the timing were still intact. The show was canceled after 8 episodes, and the reviews were not kind. She read them alone, late at night, returning to them repeatedly, not as punishment exactly, but because she needed to understand whether what the critics were saying was true, whether the thing that had made her who she was had an expiration date nobody mentioned when they were handing it to her. November of that same year brought a different kind of reckoning. Desi was dying. Lung cancer had reached the point where there was nothing left to negotiate. And despite the decades between the divorce and that moment, despite everything the marriage had contained, Lucy had never stopped caring for him in a way that operated beneath all the reasons not to. She called regularly, wrote letters, flew to see him in his final weeks. Their daughter Lucy remembered how much tenderness moved through those visits, how much forgiveness passed between two people who had known each other at the fullest and hurt each other at the worst, and still, at the end, chose gentleness. On November 30th, their wedding anniversary, Lucy called him one last time. She said the only thing left to say, "I love you." She said it again and again. Desi, weak but present, whispered back, "I love you too, honey, and good luck with your show." 2 days later, on December the 2nd, 1986, Desi Arnaz died at 69, and something that had been quietly holding in Lucy for years simply let go. 5 days after his death, she attended the Kennedy Center Honors in Washington. Her family had convinced her to go when she planned to stay home, and midway through the ceremony, actor Robert Stack walked onto the stage holding a letter Desi had written in his final days, knowing she would be sitting in that room. Stack read it aloud. Desi had written that when the New York Times asked him to divide credit for I Love Lucy among the writers, directors, and cast, he told them to give Lucy 90% and split the remaining 10 among everyone else. Lucy was the show, the letter read. The rest of them were props. Damn good props, but props. And then the closing line, "I Love Lucy," was never just a title. The cameras found her face at that moment and stayed there. Her hands were trembling, and Gary held one of them tightly, while President Reagan and the First Lady watched without speaking from across the room. Lucille Ball, who had spent 70 years perfecting the art of controlling what her face showed the world, let go of all of it at once. The room wept with her, without embarrassment, without hesitation, because what they were watching was the most honest moment she had ever shared with an audience in her entire life. Her final television interview came a few months into 1989. She was thinner, her voice softer, but the timing was still there, that precise, unlearnable sense of exactly when a line lands. When the interviewer asked what she wanted to be remembered for, she didn't reach for the answer quickly. She looked down and considered it the way a person considers a question they've been carrying for years without ever finding the right words for it. And then she said, "For making people happy, that's all I ever wanted." A faint smile followed, and the room held its silence longer than it needed to. On April 26, 1989, her heart gave out. 77 years old. 40 years of making the world laugh, and she had done every bit of it while carrying, without complaint and without an audience, everything that kind of laughter takes from a person to give.